In 1963 Mississippi, Abilene Clark shares her life story with a writer. She was born into a world where becoming a maid was her destiny, just like her mother and grandmother before her. Over the years, she has raised 17 white children, while her own son was cared for by someone else. Now, she works for the Leafold family, where the mother, Elizabeth, a wealthy socialite, barely pays attention to her daughter May. For just 95 cents an hour, Abilene does most of the parenting. This story really begins when Skeeter Phelan, a young woman fresh out of college, returns home. She dreamed of working at a top publishing house in New York, but they told her she needed experience first. So, she takes a small job at the local newspaper, answering housewives' cleaning questions for $8 a week. Abilene also introduces us to her best friend, Minnie Jackson, another maid. Minnie works for the Holbrook family, where the wife, Hilly, is not only a powerful socialite but also the president of the Junior League. Recently, Hilly moved her sick mother, Mrs. Walters, into her home, which meant firing their longtime maid. But she made room for Minnie, because no one cooks better than Minnie, and Hilly can't resist her famous pies. Minnie has always been there for Abilene, especially after she lost her son 4 years ago. But today, there's new drama. Hilly is hosting a bridge club gathering, which gives Abilene and Minnie time to gossip in the kitchen. Minnie shares Hilly's latest insult. She's marking the toilet paper with a pencil to make sure Minnie isn't using the family's bathroom. Minnie, always quick-witted, now carries her own toilet paper to avoid trouble. Meanwhile, Skeeter joins the gathering. Her old friends welcome her warmly, but the mood shifts when she casually mentions her job. In their world, a woman is supposed to marry young, not chase a career. The tension rises again when Skeeter asks Elizabeth if she can speak with Abilene later, for help with answering cleaning questions. Elizabeth admits she can't do what Hilly suggests because her maid quit, which causes a bit of a stir. Just then, the phone rings and Abilene answers. It's Celia Foote. Celia is an outcast among the socialites because she married Hilly's ex, Johnny. Since Elizabeth refuses to take the call, Celia asks Abilene if she knows any maids looking for work. Unfortunately, Abilene can't help her. After mocking Celia for a while, the women shift the conversation to bathrooms. Hilly refuses to use Elizabeth's guest bathroom because the maid also uses it. She insists Elizabeth should build a separate one for the maid. Hilly even believes African Americans carry different diseases and has created the Home Health Sanitation Initiative, a plan to require every home to have a separate bathroom for black housekeepers. As the meeting wraps up, Skeeter asks Abilene to help her with some letters, and Abilene agrees. Skeeter also apologizes for the bathroom talk before bringing up her old maid, Constantine. Abilene, who was friends with Constantine, hasn't seen her in a long time. But when Skeeter says Constantine quit, Abilene is shocked. That's not what really happened. Before Skeeter can ask more, Elizabeth cuts in and hands her Hilly's initiative to include in the League newsletter. Back home, Skeeter questions her mother about Constantine. Charlotte refuses to answer and is more concerned about Skeeter getting married. During dinner, Skeeter presses for the truth again. Her father lies, but Skeeter keeps pushing until she finds out the devastating truth. Constantine was fired after 29 years of service. An argument breaks out. Charlotte refuses to acknowledge that Constantine practically raised Skeeter. Frustrated, Skeeter storms out, recalling how Constantine used to comfort her as a child. That memory sparks an idea. Skeeter wants to write a book revealing the real stories of black maids so the world can see their side of the story. The next day, Skeeter visits Abilene for help with the newspaper column while a construction worker begins planning the new bathroom. When Skeeter is sure no one else can hear, she asks Abilene to share her stories for the book. But Abilene refuses. Their conversation is cut short when Elizabeth storms in, arguing with her husband. He's furious about the extra bathroom and leaves in a huff. Abilene rushes to check on May when the little girl starts crying. Meanwhile, Elizabeth warns Skeeter to stop asking Abilene about the letters. That night, a tornado hits the town. Minnie is terrified to use the outdoor bathroom, but Hilly refuses to let her use the indoor one. Desperate, Minnie sneaks in and uses her employer's bathroom anyway. But Hilly finds out and fires her on the spot. A few days later, Abilene's new bathroom is finished, meaning she also has to go outside now. But in a rare, touching moment, May calls Abilene her real mom. Skeeter visits Abilene again, asking for her help with the book. But this makes Abilene miss her bus home. She refuses Skeeter once more, explaining how her cousin was burned just for walking near a voting station. She won't risk her life. Still, Skeeter gives her phone number to Abilene, offering her a ride, which Abilene also refuses. Determined, Skeeter starts researching the laws controlling black people's lives. What she finds is horrifying. Publishing ideas about equality can lead to jail, books can't be shared between black and white schools, and black barbers aren't allowed to cut white women's hair. Later that evening, Abilene gets a frantic call from Minnie. Hilly has spread lies, telling everyone that Minnie is a thief. In revenge, Minnie has done something drastic. though she won't say exactly what. She breaks down in tears, realizing she'll never find work again. Their conversation is suddenly cut off when Minnie's husband comes home. Furious that she lost her job, he starts beating her. Aibileen is shaken. She thinks about the book. Then, after hearing her pastor's sermon about courage, she makes a decision. She calls Skeeter. Skeeter, careful not to be seen, parts far away and walks to Aibileen's house. This time, Aibileen is ready to talk. She doesn't care if the stories aren't flattering to white people. She just wants the truth to be told. And so, the story comes full circle, right back to where it all began. Hilly's new maid asks for a $75 loan to send her kids to college and even offers to work for free to pay it back. But Hilly coldly refuses, claiming she's actually doing her a favor, because according to her, God doesn't give charity to people who are already well off. Meanwhile, Minnie's husband forces their daughter to drop out of school and become a maid to help with expenses. Minnie herself struggles to find work until Aibileen comes up with an idea. There's one person who hasn't heard Hilly's nasty lies, Celia. Minnie visits Celia and is immediately welcomed. Celia is a terrible housewife and, being pregnant, desperately needs help. She offers Minnie the job, but asks her to keep it a secret from her husband, Johnny. Minnie agrees. At the next junior league meeting, Hilly proudly announces that her health initiative has been sent to the governor and reminds Skeeter to publish it in the newsletter. Skeeter, trying to avoid it, lies and says she'll do it soon. Meanwhile, she continues her interviews with Aibileen, now discussing how awful Elizabeth is as a mother. Minnie walks in, horrified by the idea of talking about their employers, but within seconds, she changes her mind. Soon, she's spilling all kinds of stories to Skeeter and even promises to convince other maids to share their experiences too. That Saturday, Hilly sets Skeeter up on a double date with a guy named Stuart. But Stuart turns out to be rude and dismissive, so Skeeter, furious, storms out before even ordering dinner. Meanwhile, Minnie and Celia grow close. Unlike other employers, Celia treats Minnie with kindness and even invites her to eat lunch together. Later, Skeeter gets an update from the editor. Her stories are good, but they need at least a dozen maids to come forward for the book to be published. Aibileen and Minnie try recruiting others, but everyone is too scared. That's when Minnie comes up with a bold idea. Since they're already using fake names, why not include some of her own stories and credit them to different maids? Skeeter hesitates. She wants the book to be real, not fiction. But Aibileen, determined to keep the project alive, finally opens up about something deeply personal, her son. While carrying a heavy load of wood, he lost his balance, fell, and was hit by a truck. The foreman didn't bother with any care. He just threw the injured man into his truck, drove to the segregated hospital, dumped him there, honked the horn, and left. But the hospital couldn't do anything. Aibileen took him home, where he died on the couch at just 24 years old. Writing this book is Aibileen's way of finding closure. The next day, Stuart shows up to apologize to Skeeter. He had been drinking that night because of a recent breakup, and Hilly had pressured him into the date. Skeeter is direct and speaks her mind, something Stuart isn't used to, but he respects her for it. Seeing that he's being sincere, Skeeter agrees to another date, and this time, it goes well. Stuart admires Skeeter's intelligence and even admits he's been reading her newspaper columns. Soon, the two start dating for real. Later, when Skeeter begins working on the newsletter, she decides to play a little prank. She tweaks a few words in her article, and when it gets published, Hilly's coat drive turns into a toilet drive. The next morning, Hilly wakes up to find her yard filled with old toilets. Meanwhile, on television, civil rights activist Medgar Evers is fighting for equality, but Skeeter's mother, Charlotte, refuses to let anyone in the house watch his speech. That night, tragedy strikes. Evers is assassinated in front of his own children. Chaos erupts in the streets, and Aibileen, fearing for her safety, takes shelter at Minnie's house. Despite their growing fear about the book they're writing, they agree to be more cautious and keep going. The next day, Minnie finds Celia in the bathroom, bleeding. She's had another miscarriage. Minnie helps her to bed, comforting her as Celia finally confesses her fear. Johnny only married her because she was pregnant, but she lost that baby a month later. Since then, she's had 3 more miscarriages, including this one, but she never told him. She's terrified he'll leave her if he finds out. Minnie reassures her that he'll stay. Later, Celia buries the baby in the garden, just as she had done with the others. Meanwhile, Hilly's maid is arrested, right in front of all the other maids. While cleaning under the couch, she found a ring. Thinking she could make some money, she took it to a pawn shop, but the clerk got suspicious and called the police. Meanwhile, Skeeter visits Aibileen and is shocked to see a crowd of maids gathered, finally ready to share their stories. The morning's arrest had been the final straw. They talk about the cruelty they've endured, and the most heartbreaking part? The very children they raised grew up to be just as cruel as their parents. The next day, the socialites hold another bridge club party. Hoping to fit in, Celia shows up with a homemade pie, but instead of welcoming her, the women hide and ignore her. Humiliated, she leaves in tears. At home, Minnie scolds her for trying to befriend such nasty people. She explains that the women hate Celia because she married Johnny. But Celia misunderstands. She thinks they believe Johnny cheated on Hilly. In reality, his relationship with Celia started after Hilly was out of the picture. Determined to clear things up, Celia decides to set the record straight at the charity event. Minnie warns her not to go, but Celia changes the subject by tending to Minnie's wounds. She knows Minnie didn't just fall. Her husband hurt her. Celia urges Minnie to fight back and leave him, but Minnie has children to protect. A few days later, tragedy strikes. President Kennedy is assassinated. Fear grips Aibileen as she worries about being discovered. That's when Minnie shares her secret weapon, the terrible thing she did. Years ago, she baked Hilly a pie with her own excrement in it. Hilly's mother, Mrs. Walters, had watched her daughter eat 2 whole slices and laughed so hard that Hilly later sent her to a nursing home. Aibileen and Skeeter think including this story in their book is too risky. It would expose Minnie. But Minnie insists. Hilly would never let anyone know what she ate. The story is her perfect shield. On the night of the charity event, Johnny and Celia arrive, making the socialites uneasy. During the raffle, Minnie's infamous chocolate pie ends up in Hilly's hands, even though she swears she never entered her name. Then, a tipsy Celia approaches Hilly, trying to explain that Johnny never cheated on her. But in the commotion, she accidentally rips the sleeve of her dress, causing an even bigger scene. As the situation starts to escalate, Johnny quickly takes his wife away. But before they can leave, Celia ends up throwing up on the floor. Once the event is over, Mrs. Walters takes the pie with her and reveals a shocking truth. She was the one who bid on it, using Hilly's name just to get back at her daughter for sending her to a nursing home. The next day, Celia realizes she doesn't belong in this fancy high society life and decides she wants to leave Johnny. But Minnie convinces her to stay, warning her that if she leaves, Hilly's manipulation will win. Meanwhile, Skeeter is close to finishing her book, but she needs one final story, Constantine's. Desperate for answers, she forces her mother, Charlotte, to tell the truth. Months ago, Charlotte was hosting a Daughters of America luncheon after being named state regent. Everything was going smoothly until Constantine's daughter, Rachel, showed up unexpectedly. Normally, Rachel would enter the house through the front, but this time, Charlotte made her wait in the kitchen. However, Rachel refused and walked straight inside, insisting she wanted to see her mother. The other women at the event disapproved, pressuring Charlotte to take action. Giving in to social expectations, she kicked both Rachel and Constantine out. The next day, Charlotte regretted her decision and went to Constantine's house to bring her back, but it was too late. She had already left with Rachel. Charlotte later sent her son to Chicago to try and find her, but the worst had already happened. Constantine had passed away. Heartbroken, Charlotte tries to apologize to Skeeter, but she runs out in tears. Determined to finish her book, Skeeter visits Constantine's abandoned house and writes her final story. She sends the manuscript to the editor, but the payment she receives is disappointing. Still, she shares the money with the Maids. When the book is finally published anonymously, it becomes a hit. Even Mrs. Walters reads it at the nursing home. When she recognizes the infamous pie story, she bursts into laughter and calls Hilly, urging her to read it. Unfortunately, Skeeter's success comes at a price. When she confesses to Stuart that she wrote the book, he breaks up with her, calling her selfish. Meanwhile, Hilly finally gets her hands on a copy and panics. She desperately tries to stop the rumors spreading among her friends. Rumors that suggest the book's shocking stories might be about their very own town. Hilly finally snaps when she receives a donation check from Celia for a charity, but the check is made out to 2 Slice Hilly. Furious and humiliated, she storms over to Skeeter's house, just as Skeeter receives a letter confirming her new job at a publishing company. Hilly threatens to sue her, but Skeeter calmly reminds her that doing so would mean admitting, in front of everyone, that she ate that infamous pie. At that moment, Skeeter's mother, Charlotte, steps in, fiercely defending her daughter and ordering Hilly to leave. After Hilly is gone, Charlotte tells Skeeter how proud she is of her. She congratulates her on the new job and thanks her for bringing courage back to their family. Meanwhile, Minnie is startled when Johnny, Celia's husband, suddenly approaches her. She fears the worst, but instead, Johnny thanks her for taking care of Celia. Celia has finally told him about her miscarriages, and he's grateful Minnie was there when his wife needed someone the most. He's also known all along that Celia secretly hired help. Since Minnie arrived, Celia has been doing much better. Johnny then takes Minnie back home, where Celia has prepared a meal all by herself, waiting for them with a big smile. Johnny offers Minnie a permanent job in their home, and without hesitation, she accepts. With this newfound security, Minnie finally finds the courage to leave her abusive husband for good. Aibileen and Minnie later attend church, where the entire congregation gives them a standing ovation. As a token of appreciation, the community gifts Aibileen a book signed by everyone, making up for the fact that her name was left off the cover. After Mass, they take the book to Skeeter, showing her the impact of what she's done. But Skeeter hesitates about moving to New York, feeling guilty for the chaos she's caused. Aibileen and Minnie reassure her that there's nothing more she can do here. They want her to go and chase a better life. The next day, Aibileen returns from the grocery store to find Hilly accusing her of stealing silverware. The claim is obviously false, but Elizabeth, too afraid to stand up to Hilly, fires Aibileen anyway. When Hilly smugly threatens her with jail, Aibileen looks her in the eye and calls her a godless woman. Hilly is left in tears. News reports across the country show crowds flooding the streets. Factories have shut down, and desperate people are sneaking across the zones, trying to reach New Greenwich. The authorities insist they have everything under control, but everyone knows the system is on the brink of collapse. At the timekeeper's office, the workers give up and go home. There's nothing left for them to do. Meanwhile, Will and Sylvia remain free, hitting even bigger banks to make sure the old system never returns. Please subscribe for more videos like this. Turn on notifications and leave a like. It really helps the channel. Thank you for watching.